So an introduction to Validator. So Validator is bundled into Storyboard as a perspective. So it can be accessed through the perspectives. So once we flip over to the Validator perspective, you'll notice a couple new views. So we have the tests view and we have the test results view. So one of the main ways that tests are going to be created is through the test recording action here. So we can trigger a new test recording. So I'll just go ahead and give it a default name, test 001. That's fine for me for now, for demonstration purposes. And once the recording starts, this starts a capture playback. So this will be recording user input and it will be played back in the test. So we can perform a few different actions. So we can capture the full screen. We can capture portions of the display that are the interesting parts. We can capture various controls that exist on screen. We can also go ahead and capture data. So this is this dialog is going to be further refined, but we have this dialog right now, which allows us to select certain elements on your display that you wish to measure. For example, if I would like to measure the position of this drop down here, I could go ahead and do that. I could perhaps also grab my overlay and check the hidden value on it. So if we do that now, and then we do a drop down and do another capture data. And if we wanted to capture those same points, the data, and say the X and Y for our demo control, we can go ahead and do that. And yeah, so that's a simple test. So we can go and play that back. Since I was talking during it, it'll have a little bit of delays in those times where I was doing more talking. But you can see here the playback's happening. So this is what the green outline around the outside edge is indicating that a playback is happening. And you'll have noticed that during a recording, there was a red outline. So as the test runs, the test is generating what we call test artifacts. So these are those images for our captures of the display, the regions and controls, and there's artifacts for the data captures as well. And as they're received, we start processing them. And then once the test is complete, we can review the results here. So what's interesting is that these tests, so as we just played it back, that's one part of it. But that was a passing use case. So I can kind of artificially create a failing use case if we'd like by kind of interacting with the application in a way that it doesn't expect. For example, if I increase the temperature before we capture our screenshot might not contain the correct values anymore since I've interacted with the app outside of the expected results. So we'll have some failing captures, which is actually good in this case since it's different than our expectations. So this would also go for, if somebody changed some UI elements that were unexpected, or if some scripts in logic no longer worked as expected, that would also show up as failures. So the test result viewer here shows the differences between our expected reference result and our actual result. And then we could also just see the plain result without any ordained extra drawing on it. Yeah, so that's a very simple test use case, but there are some other mechanisms for leveraging some reusability. So we can go ahead and perform a little example of that. So we can go and if I start a new test recording, perhaps we want to create a sequence that is, I'm going to call it the demo test sequence here. So, and what this is going to do is it's going to be a sequence that tests this. I'm going to take a screen capture there. I can perhaps do a capture of the control actually, sorry, excuse me, not the control, the region here. And I can grab this area and do a capture. I can bring it down perhaps and do another capture. And basically all I'm doing here is creating a new sequence. And now I'm going to end it. I'm just going to go ahead and call it sequence 2. So now that I've created that reusable sequence, I can go ahead and change screens, and I can specify to grab that demo test sequence, and it'll actually go ahead and play back that sequence now and perform those test actions that were part of that sequence. So I can specify yeah, an existing sequence, and we can reuse those actions. So once the outline goes red, that'll be how I know that it's my turn to interact with the application again. And that is interesting. There it goes. There's a long delay there because I was talking. So now that we've started a new sequence again, we can go ahead and travel to perhaps a new screen. If we have other things we'd like to do here, such as interacting with certain elements of the screen, we can. And then if we want, again, we can go ahead and run that demo test sequence, which will execute our sequence from before with that long delay at the end, unfortunately. But that's what happens when you talk during a test recording. But yeah, so it allows us to have certain sequences, like perhaps a password input sequence where a user's putting in the correct password for entering into the next screen. Perhaps there's a failing password sequence where you want to, test a failing password so that you can just validate that those work as expected. And yeah, so that's just an example of how these sequences can be reused. So it allows you to kind of build up certain key parts of your tests that can be used over and over again in this test or in other tests as well. So maybe you have an initialization sequence. So you might start every test off by initializing it the same way. And yeah, that's the mechanism for making that happen. So yeah, after this ends, I'm going to go ahead and close this test, and we could play back. We can play back, and we'll see how that goes on a playback. It'll of course be a little bit long, but I can do one thing to shorten that quickly here. If I modify this from 15 seconds, so this is that long delay at the end here, I can bring that down to say 400 milliseconds. It doesn't need to be a long delay at the end. So that small change will allow us to have a faster playback than we did the first time. So if I go ahead and run this test again, you'll now see, again, just like we did before, that the playback is going to happen and the progress is going to be reported as it progresses through the test here in the playback panel. Yeah, not too much else for me to say, I guess, at this point. If anybody has any questions, I could answer them while this is playing back. I tried to be very thorough. I probably missed some stuff for sure anyways, but it definitely...
Yeah, like I think that's a great point, Mike. So if people are wondering, what else can it do? If that is a question, feel free to prop that question up, because there is other stuff that we can do, but we're trying to keep the demo time short here. There is obviously more to this than what Mike's showing, but I think that what Mike has highlighted is the true power of what we're trying to put here, which is making testing of your UI very, very simple. So, and yes, we've driven everything through the designer in this case, but there is going to be the ability to run things from command line, integrated into your build system, your nightly regressions, what have you. But this is what we're trying to show here, is how quickly you can set up your UI testing for your project And then, you know, all the other parts about running as part of your nightly, well, that's just documentation where you basically say, call this command at this point, and it just all works. And then there's also the ability to sort of generate reports and, you know, basically have other modes of reporting what's happened during the test playback. But this is sort of the best demoable part of this product, because it shows just how quickly Mike was able to sort of build up a test case for his application. So if there are other questions, you know, feel free to shout them out.
Here's the results after the test completes here. So we have all passing tests. In this case, I only took captures, so I didn't do any data captures, but I did take some partial screen captures as well as full screen captures. And yeah, you can see how the demo test sequence here appears many times, but has different results depending on which screen you're on. But the results are tracked back to the appropriate reference results. So yeah.
Mike, can you show a demo of how where something maybe I've seen it in the past where the expectation of what it was supposed to look, but a change has been made that basically that kind of highlights to the user where a change was made in the GUI?
Sure. Let me think of a good one. So that's part, yeah. So if perhaps, do I have another good icon here? I may not.
Because I know in the past you would change the name from Crank Software to say Crank AMETEK.
Oh yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, that's the one I was trying to think of a good. So here I'll flip over to master context so that I can, even though I'm in a design state, I'll be able to make a real change. So I'll change this name here. All right, there's the change that I was trying to make. So we've changed that name to Crank AMETEK. So now if we were to do I'll just play back test number 1 since it was succinct enough that it should still, I believe, capture our differences here. Actually, does it do a playback? It may or may not. We'll see. I can't recall if it has any captures with the dialogue down. We only seem to capture the data in that case, so we might not actually have caught that one. So I might have to flip back to test number 2. So it'll definitely be caught in test number 2 since we perform a visual capture here rather than just a couple key data points like I did on the first test where we only captured the X and Y with the demo control in its down position. Yeah, so here you can see the capture already has failed on us.
And so while that's kind of running, just the intent, if you can talk to the intent of that, like, so basically if you have multiple people working on the same UI and you have an overall test case that you run on a regular basis, it allows you to know if any changes had been made, correct?
Yeah, exactly that. And it allows you to validate that they're the right changes. And once they are, we have a mechanism to update those artifacts that are generated so that we can quickly re-baseline our expectations. So that we can quickly handle change, because change is expected. Your tests will start off in one state, and over time they will continue to evolve. Your application will continue to evolve, and you need a quick mechanism for keeping those synchronized. And the tests just are the mechanism where you can identify those changes and then validate them as changes that were on purpose rather than accidental changes. It's a very long test. I'm sorry for the duration of this test.
Not a problem. And so, of course, once it's complete, then where we see those fails, is there a mechanism to take the user exactly to where it's failed?
Yeah, so I'll go through that. There's a couple ways we can kind of just there's a mechanism for just accept all as passes. So we can update all the reference results in one quick pass, or what we can do is we can cycle through the results, which allows you to analyze them on a case-by-case basis. So we can choose to accept or reject accordingly. So this case, we'll accept these new results as the new masters, reference results on a case-by-case basis, just making sure that there's nothing else that's changed that we don't expect to have changed. Yeah. And now that I've made all those changes, we have all passing results now. So there we go. So that is the new expected behavior. So if that name were to change again, we would detect new failures going forward.